Thank you everyone for joining us for Ground Rounds today, those in person as well as online. Today we have Lieutenant Colonel Dr. Kim giving us Ground Rounds, and he will be speaking on balancing the dual role of family medicine, family physician, and a uniformed officer. Before I hand it over to Dr. Kim, I will do a little bit of an introduction. You all have his bio, so you can follow along. So Dr. Kim was born in Busan, Korea, and he spent most of his childhood there, moving here at 17 years of age, and completed high school and attended University of California, Berkeley for undergraduate. He joined U.S. Army in 2002 through health professional scholarship, and he attended University of Illinois College of Medicine. After that, he completed his family medicine residency at Tripler Army Medical Center. After completing his training, he did several assignments in Korea. After that, he came back to Fort Bragg to become a surgeon of Fort Bragg Warrior Transition Battalion. And then he did a hospitalist fellowship at Womack Army Medical Center after that. Most recently, he was a department chair of family medicine at Fort Belvoir Community Hospital. Right now, he is a chief quality officer at the DHA, the National Capital Region Defense Health Agency. Lieutenant Colonel Kim has received several military awards that you see there. He is married to his wife, Minhyun Anna Kim. I'm sorry if I botched her name, and they have 3 boys. So with that, I will hand it over to Dr. Kim. If you have questions, please wait until the end and you can ask or put it in the chat. I will be monitoring the chat. I'll also be putting the evaluation link in the chat, so please complete that after the session is done. Thank you.
Thank you for the kind introduction. And thank you, everybody, both here physically and online. I realize and recognize the fact that you have other choices for lunch. So we greatly appreciate it. So besides my current job or role as the Chief Medical Officer at NCR Market, I also am an assistant professor here. I would like to actually come back here more often, and I guess this geographic proximity will actually facilitate that a little better than before. So again, I'm Dr. Kim, and pleasure to be here. So these are my disclaimers, not much, just standard stuff. Just understand that some of the stuff that I'm going to actually talk about are doctrinal, but most of these are basically what I actually have observed and experienced. And it kind of goes back to the topic of this talk, which I feel very passionate about. I actually joined the Army through HPSP, and I see my future colleagues sitting right there. So thank you very much for coming. And my hope here is to put a little, plant a little seed in your minds as to how you're going to actually make the best out of yourself. And it starts from a lot of the things that I think a lot of us staff physicians should be asking ourselves, especially whenever things become a little confusing. I would like to actually give special thanks to the colleagues and mentors, and our own Dr. Brian Ford actually allowed me to use one of his slides. So we'll actually move on. We're going to talk about what it means to be uniformed physicians. For some reason, and I think I know that reason, but I see all Army uniforms among the med students. HUA, I would say. We have Air Force, we have Navy officers sitting right in front of me, and we have a civilian faculty as well, Dr. Gosa. So what does that mean, though, to be a family physician and a military officer? And it's very important. This is an and, not versus or and or. It is an and for a reason. We are also going to talk about different priorities and missions, what I call sometimes different cultures when you're in a military treatment facility, like Fort Belvoir or even the clinic here at USU or Walter Reed, versus when you're out there in line units. And I'm going to explain what it means to be a line unit. We're also going to talk about how we can actually better maintain our proficiency, our clinical acumen, while we're progressing in the military, right? Slides are not advancing. Okay. You may need to keep it at that index mode rather than a slideshow mode. Yeah. Yeah. And see if the online audience can actually see. Okay. It's a little smaller for you folks, but this is what I actually copied and pasted from the Air Force HPSP website. Because when I was putting this together, I actually gave this talk at the USAFP in March. I kind of modified it a little bit for this particular talk. But what I decided to do is, okay, let's see how the military advertises what it means to be military physicians, right? So if you look at some of these language here, my feedback to these advertisements is, and I think I understand why, because they don't want to kind of tell you, oh, you're going to be dropping bombs, kicking doors, and you know, dodging bullets and stuff like that, and then care for your fellow service members. The way that it's portrayed here is more of a doctors in uniform rather than uniformed physicians. Translating a little further, soldier, medics, sailor, medic, or a corpsman, whatever. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about that, why I think it's kind of important. And although I don't have any way of providing my feedback to our HPSP advertisers, maybe I do through certain channels through USU as well. Like Dr. Ryota, maybe that is an idea. It just kind of dawned on me, but I'm gonna proceed. So this is a slide that I guess Dr. Ford is very familiar with. I actually stole this slide from him. It is kind of like representing our typical daily scene, right? In an MTF clinic setting. So on any given day, you have the retirees, family members of the active duty, you have the active duty troop care, there's almost always some type of sick call going on. It's a mix of everybody, right? So it's not just a difference in category of beneficiaries in TRICARE, but our mission is to provide best care we can to the best group of people, meaning service members, their families, retirees and their families, so on and so forth. Now, this scene, if you subtract all the military logos and the uniforms, very similar to the civilian sector, right? Essentially the same. Now, contrast that to this, right? These are photos I took when I was stationed in Korea and symbolized by this cross with all my gears. That was when I was the first Armored Brigade Combat Team Surgeon, the brigade surgeon. In my office, I had all my gears. The only thing I didn't have was my weapons and the ammo, basically. Everything else, I actually had them with me because the motto over there is fight tonight. So at the brink of the signal, we just kind of gear up and get out there. And Korea is like that. You know, there's no peace treaty between North and South Korea. So the war is technically still going on. It's just on truce. And these are the pictures of the aid stations. A little bit different, right, than the first picture that I showed you. What are some of the differences, if I may actually ask one of the members in the audience? What are the things that kind of jump out at you? Go ahead. The trauma kits. Great. All right. Yeah. So in the Army, those are called MES, so medical equipment sets. And they have TCMC and all kinds of patient decon, all kinds of different MESs. It's prepackaged almost like crash carts, right? And those who are in charge of those are supposed to go through maintain, just like how we maintain crash carts at the treatment facilities. Make sure the meds are not expired and you have everything that you need. So it's all about readiness. It's all about readiness. Besides just the greens that you see, and it's not really pristine like the civilian sector or maybe in garrison setting. Yes, that's a good observation. Now, I think what I'm trying to depict here is, again, what I just said. We are combat support element, right? So what does that mean? We're there to conserve the fighting strength. I mean, that was the motto of MedCom in the Army, at least. And in the Navy and Air Force, you guys all have similar mottos, meaning we exist to preserve the combat strength. It's not the other way around. But in the MTFs, somehow, somewhere along the line, maybe it's just the way that we were kind of raised, and especially me, you know, kind of going through the civilian medical school, where there's no military, you know, aspect. It's just patient care, right? And even in here, and then maybe in Walter Reed, maybe in Fort Belvoir, sometimes we just kind of get too used to just seeing these uniforms as kind of like a hospital uniform, just another cool military-looking hospital uniform. And then we kind of think, interact, and treat patient population as if we were civilian providers. No, let's kind of take a step back. Think, pause a little bit and take a step back. We exist to preserve the combat strength. Some of the other pictures that I took when I was at Special Operations Command Korea, I was a command surgeon over there advising a 1-star. So twice a year, we would actually do JCS, Joint Chief of Staff level exercises. It's a big deal throughout the whole country, to nations. Sometimes other nations kind of join, and we blow things and do all kinds of war fighting simulations. During those exercises, I actually started this thing called RUMEP, ROC US Medical Exchange Program, with the Republic of Korea Special Operations guys. And as you can see, these are the Korean counterparts. That's me, that's my sergeant, Sergeant Holtz, and 2 activated reservists that joined us during the exercise as an individual augmentees who participated in these exchanges. So we not only talked about some of the policy stuff or maybe tactics that are useful, but also we kind of compared our aid bags. We ended up actually contributing to their latest revision of the aid bag, and you know, that kind of stuff. This is the Korean FLA, the military ambulance. That's like inside the ambulance that we were going over some of the similarities and differences. That's Captain Koda. That's Sergeant Major Bowling. They were from SOCOM, Special Operations Command, which is also a 4-star level command that graciously kind of came out to us participating and putting the emphasis on the importance of these interoperability exchanges, all right? So we call certain nations allies. What does that mean? Can we still work with them? Tell me, folks, colleagues, even among US military system, we're still trying to figure out how do we overcome the differences between Army, Air Force, and Navy. Still going on a daily basis at Walter Reed and at Fort Belvoir. Now you're gonna actually talk about different nations and their cultures, their different food items in the MREs. How is that gonna work? All starts at the tactical level, and then these experiences will actually help you provide realistic feedback to those decision makers who put out policies or certain decisions in the military, right? Let's switch gears a little bit. We've been talking about military medicine, just being a physician. Now, forget military. Among civilian physicians themselves, they have articles like this, and more reports are coming out saying those that are physician executives, more and more of them are not seeing patients at all. And some of them, especially if they have MHA, Masters of Healthcare Administration, or MBA, or CPE, those things after their MD or DO degrees, it's very well accepted that they don't see patients. They're too busy to see patients. But there are more and more reports in the literature that they should at least partially maintain patient care. Why? To maintain that real, realistic touch. And when they make decisions and sign certain policies to put them into effect, they need that realistic experience. And that's part of the reason why, as a chief of family medicine, I still was seeing patients predominantly in the inpatient side of the house, just because there was more need for it, but also clinic patients as well. So among physician leaders out there in the civilian side, there's that struggle of maintaining proficiency. That's the point that I'm going to actually drive here. So how do we keep up? How do we keep up? I find this article very interesting. It's a little bit dated, 2011. So according to the statistics, they're saying in 1950, the amount of time it takes to double the medical knowledge took 50 years. Fast forward to 2010, 3.5 years, every 3.5 years, everything that we know in medicine doubled. By 2020, it was projected to be 0.2 years, like 73 days, right? So us being in 2022, or soon to be 2025, it might be like a month. Every month, we're doubling the entire reservoir of medical knowledge. That's crazy. So by the time you guys graduate out of this university, all the things that you haven't learned, will have, I don't know, maybe exponentially quadrupled or whatever. Like you just multiply that. How do we keep up? Or even better, how do we advise our patient population with this speed of advances, right? On the right side, I actually just copied and pasted something that I used to do all the time as the department chair, family medicine for Belvoir, is credentialing, right? Granting privileges to the new providers that would actually come to me. And yes, out of family medicine residency, which I hope every single one of you guys go into, by the way, you get to do all these things. So, topical anesthesia, peripheral nerve block, newborn lumbar puncture, adult lumbar puncture, delivering babies, doing paracentesis, thoracentesis, all that stuff, first assist. Yes, it's great, because family medicine speaks to what? Cradle to grave. We take care of everything. We're the breath specialists. The other medical specialists probably know about the same, but then they actually flip it this way and they go for death, right? I have some of the providers who've been in the military doing a lot of the leadership and just military-wise. I mean, when you become generals and flag officers, it's kind of understandable, but been colonels or 06 for 20, 30 years almost. Not having seen anybody. And yet, on their exit progress report, I saw they actually put down fully competent for every one of these That's just not the right thing to do, right? Because if you, the flip side of it, my current job as a chief quality officer at the NCR market is to make sure that we actually do these processes correctly. Because whatever you're credentialed in, another way of saying it is that if anything goes wrong, you're liable for that. So it is a balance as to how much of a breadth of a scope of practice you want to actually maintain. And the key point that I'm going to actually emphasize on is that you get to determine that or influence that at least throughout your career management. So Lieutenant Kim will actually remember this. She and I actually served in JTF Bravo together, Joint Task Force Bravo. She was a Sergeant Kim back then. We were actually medically evacuating a patient that whose condition was above the capability that we had on post. Now remember, we were there at the peak of COVID, so and the clinic on post was basically a clinic. It was less than a clinic, a role 2 minus, I would say. So because we were locked down during COVID, there was no interaction with the locals. We were just surrounded by these walls. So we had to actually, when we have a patient who needed a higher level of care and transfer over to host nation hospital, we had to make certain analysis and think about it, right? Okay, what are the risks of sending this person via ground ambulance versus air ambulance, this HH60? What are some of the risks and the benefits of choosing either option? And we decided to actually go with this helo option for, I believe this patient actually had a brain injury. So you have to actually think about those things. These are not some of the things that are actually taught, but a lot of the times it's kind of on-the-job training type of thing, and you get to actually have a feel for making that assessment. Now, another point that I like to make is, out of everybody here, here's me, here's the medic from the aviation battalion. Everybody else, not medical. But guess what? They were all wearing the same uniform as I do, right? So out there in the line units, what I mean by the line units, or you're going to actually hear that terminology a lot as you go, is an environment where there's the predominant people are not medical. They're armor officers, they're aviation officers, they're intelligence officers, they're security officers, adjutants, logisticians, you name it. And you become a minority when you go over there as a medical. But guess what? You need to still speak the language, communicate with them, help them see things through the medical lens that only you can provide, which is very important. All right, so this is a slide that Colonel Retired Mabry basically struck me with when he gave me this talk like some 15 years ago or something like that during my OBC. Maybe it was Captain Surya, of course. Can anybody tell me what the difference is between these two? Lights on, lights off. Yes, that's one of the big differences. This is a night vision situation here. Headgear. Headgear, there you go. Uniform versus scrubs. Operating room. Like gloves. Yeah, you can kind of tell. I mean, yeah, maybe I don't know what kind of gloves that the operator is actually using. So very good. Yeah, those are all good observations. What I would characterize most is, this is a controlled environment in a hospital. Again, MTF setting. This is a field environment. Few questions, right? Few questions that you may not. Okay. So you can see besides the either anesthesiologist or a CRNA intubating this patient, this person is helping, and there's another person applying cardiac pressure. So there's a lot of people. And this patient, even before this happened, was probably bagged for like good 2 minutes. Good reserve of oxygen saturation before this, right? This was probably taken during a training scene, not really a combat, a real combat situation, right? Most likely. But you probably don't have a lot of these people helping you. And some of the observations that you guys mentioned are what we call MET-TC, mission, enemy, terrain, time factor, and civilian factors. So these are all the things that we need to actually think about in the planning phase of any type of military operations. So in a real situation, this guy might be dodging bullets. You know, they say the best form of defense is what? Offense. You know, you gotta shoot back. They actually say the best form of medicine is your weapon out there, because you need to survive. You need to actually survive that hostile scene first before you do any of these. And our medics, it's most likely a 68 Whiskey 1 or a Special Forces 18 Delta that's doing this. So that's another thing. This is a credentialed provider, most likely. Out there are medics, mostly, and corpsmen and Air Force technicians tend to do these things because they actually try to protect the providers back in the rear when they evacuate the patients. But you, as uniformed medical provider, I'm including PAs and NPs and everybody as well in this particular sense, you get to actually plan for those things and then monitor and supervise any of that stuff out there in the line unit. So think about it a little bit. All right, I'm gonna actually skip through this one first. Well, actually, let's go to this one. Whenever we execute a mission, you have to actually backtrack and then start with the initiation of that thought, I guess, right? And then you kind of put together plans to reach that end state. Whenever you do any type of operation, we used to actually call it a tactical, operational, strategical, and political levels of missions. The latest, at least Army, and I think it's actually in the DoD joint publication now too, the foundation on which you actually exert your leadership is there's a direct leadership, kind of replacing the tactical leadership, organizational leadership, and then there's strategic leadership, right? So direct leadership would be if you were to actually be that battalion surgeon out there in an aid station, you're the direct leader. And those people that actually supervise you, maybe that brigade surgeon or whatever, or the battalion and the brigade leadership themselves become your immediate leadership. Organizational leadership would be a little bit more removed. So in this particular environment, USU, you have your professors and you know, the faculty members that are providing the direct leadership. Organizational leadership would be the senators and other folks that kind of run this organization. And strategic leadership would be the FOGOs, the flag officers and general officers that enable, mostly through policies and other provision of support, enable this education. Not any one of this level is any less important or more important than others. It just needs to happen. We call all that stuff towards an end result, unity of effort. For you to achieve that unity of effort, key here is communication between all levels. How often do we actually see some grand scored charts and boards and this LOEs, lines of effort, that blah, 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 mission vision, stuff like that, a lot of good stuff, but it doesn't really speak anything to me treating this person's hypertension here in the USU clinic. No, it's not somebody else who's going to actually come to you, explain those things. It is the end user, which is all of us, trying to extract that. How many people, be honest, people kind of read these director sends from like Lieutenant General Place sending out, or maybe the USU president sending out some emails here and there, messages and stuff like that. Most people are too busy to read a lot of them, just skim through that kind of stuff. Do pay attention to some of the languages, because it's a good situational awareness of what's going on. You make things relevant, not anybody else, because guess what? Every single one of you is a professional, right? And professionals do things without anybody watching over you, without anybody telling you what to do. You take care of what needs to happen. And I know you're professionals in training right now, but keep that mindset going. So I actually laud and congratulate this effort. This is one of the things that I've seen in the military medicine that demonstrates good collaboration between all those different levels. So for them to come up with an app like this through DHA, yes, the boots on the ground, OBGYN, other women's health and family physicians all kind of work to actually put together the database, all the way to making this app, contacting the IT, contracting and signing, the strategic leaders signing some of those contracts that kind of allowed for this type of, collaboration to happen, whatever. But the thought about the stress app, the conception of the idea itself came from the providers who actually listened to their patients, mostly in the deployed setting, because, it's, I guess, still, I think that the majority of, especially in the hostile and what's that word? Not hostile, denied environments out there, we have MOSs or the jobs that require men than women so much more. So a lot of those supports didn't really address the key issues like, the menstruation, maybe the birth control, maybe the treatment of, UTIs and other, gynecological issues. They were not really carefully addressed or considered, so it wasn't addressed. And most of the docs were male and that kind of stuff, right? So they actually came up with this idea. Few providers kind of put together, they pushed for it, and then the organizational leaders kind of adopted that idea and say, hey, you know what? Been there, done that. I think you're absolutely right. I'm going to give you my support. They actually communicated it to the higher leaders at the strategic level, who basically allowed for funding and other policies to happen. So something like this is a remarkable achievement, an example of it. This is another picture that I brought back from my deployment at JTF Bravo, Joint Task Force Bravo, stationed in Honduras. Towards the end of my tenure there, because I was there until June 2021, last summer. We actually did a medical training exercise out there in El Salvador, which we went out there by boat. And these are, so anybody in US uniform here are either medical planners, nurses, providers, medics, corpsmen, or yeah, I don't think there was any non-medical people in this particular picture, but if you see, he's probably an El Salvadorian Navy, El Salvadorian Army, Special Forces type of guy, and these guys are not medical, right? So we talked about a little bit about interoperability, knowing how to actually make a mission going, and it was a very successful MedRed mission that we haven't been able to do because of COVID for almost a year or two, prior to this thing happening. For that to happen, we had to actually submit deliberate risk assessment worksheet, take care of all kinds of issues that could potentially go wrong, and have mitigation plans submitted, get the general officer, all these stars of both nations agree upon these things. And then we moved, and this was on the way back, so we're all kind of relaxed, tired, but feeling very rewarding. It's moments like this that'll actually help you become good military officers. You can actually spend the entire career in MTFs, and there's some role for that. And we're gonna talk a little bit more about that too. But it is up to you to make that choice to get out of the comfort zone and then experience what you didn't know. Speaking of which, in that process, I highly, highly recommend you, and to me, it's not a recommendation, it's more of a must have. Mentor-mentee relationship is key in this actualization of our identity as a military family physicians, military healthcare professionals. In my experience, the retired General Johnson sent me this email. I think it was like 2 weeks before I actually went to Joint Task Force Bravo in Honduras. And I actually copied it in here, and the bold-fonted ones speak to the core of this talk. Taking as many challenging jobs as possible is the right answer always, regardless of rank. Regardless of rank. He's a general, all right? And he would still go for those. Keep up the good work in managing your career. Yes. Us wearing this uniform, we effectively signed our right to be totally free making decisions for ourselves to a bit, but you can still advocate for yourself to the big Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines, so forth. This is key. Balancing this with your family and their dynamics will be key for you moving forward. It's not, if it's not your wife, husband, children, it's your mother, father, maybe ailing older folks that you need to think about. And there's a lot of things that you need to balance. But if you stay focused on your identity of military physician, you'll actually navigate through all that process. And here you go. Here's a plug as my mentor. I trust this art works out well. He's giving me his trust. I mean, he's no longer, he was actually my mentor. I don't think he's ever existed in my chain of command, ever. He was the USFK surgeon, the 4-star level command, United States Forces Korea surgeon, when I was a SOC Corps surgeon. So under a 4-star combat command just like that, you have Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines, and SOF, Special Operations Forces, elements. So he was more like my brother. And then he's kind of giving me this type of mentorship. And it's not like he just kind of says, hey, Mike, I just want to check on you. Sometimes he did that, but most of the times I maintained that relationship with him. I visited him when he became the commanding general at Brooke Army Medical Center, that kind of stuff, right? So you got to seek out actively. I want to talk a little bit about leader versus manager. I'd like you to actually take a look at this, kind of read through some of these bullets. We always talk about leading by example. You have to be a good leader. Leadership is everything in the military. Does any of the doctrines or anybody that you know of talk about how to be a good manager? We call even these managerial things leadership. But we have to actually think through this, and you know, this dichotomy is rather arbitrary, a little artificial. There's a lot of overlap between the two. And yes, good leaders can be good managers and vice versa. But this is something that I'd like to actually just present to you just so that you can think through this. Because if you just stay to or strive to be good managers, it is a recipe to become a toxic leader. If you do all these things without having these things in mind, I guarantee you're going to be a toxic leader. You have to actually maintain balance. Why is Dr. King talking about this thing when he's supposed to be giving a talk on military or uniformed family physicians, like how to maintain that balance? Because that is at the foundation of everything. This is slightly outdated. I think this is an Army pamphlet on AMED, Army Medical Department career management pamphlet, which used to be in all those doctrines up until 2007. And the latest versions, I didn't see this particular presentation. I think it's still very helpful and helpful for other services as well. But on the right side, it's talking about, you know, unless you really screw up, you know, on your PT or do DUI or sharp type of event, us, thankfully, we tend to actually get promoted every 6 years. That jump is becoming a little more difficult, but still, for the majority of the cases. So that's the timeline, right? And the first 18 years to make the colonel, if you get promoted right on time, and then there's like a little over, it's almost a half point right there. And most people get out somewhere around there after their initial active duty service obligation is up. I thought I was going to too. I was just gonna put in 3 years and then get out after my ADSO and enjoy my life with my family, however way I want. And look where I am right now, right? You never know. I actually, just for record, signed up for HPSP just purely for financial reasons, because I am from California, wasn't smart enough to go to California med school, but got accepted to University of Illinois and had to actually pay this fat out-of-state student, you know, whatever fee. The first year I tried to do it on my own, knocked on the door for Citibank, and was on debt for like almost $100,000 a year, right? And I'm like, you know what? If I'm gonna sell my soul to Citibank, I might as well just do something more meaningful and be a patriot, you know? That's how I actually joined the military, believe it or not. And I was very, very glad to hear that General Volpe, the great retired Major General Volpe, joined for the same reason also. So there's no shame in it, I guess, right? But I guess coming back to this, that's the timing, and these are some of the jobs that if you want to kind of benchmark, okay, am I progressing sort of the right way? I guess I was the department chair, so somewhere, the department chair, somewhere along the line, that was an 06 position. So I think, yeah, I mean, I didn't get to do the division surgeon, but this is not you don't get to do all of them, but it's just a general guideline. And you can still Google this. Again, the newest doctrines kind of got rid of it. I don't know why. Maybe the different specialties within AMED kind of got, I don't know, political a little bit, but it's going to be helpful. And based on something like that, you create something like this. This is otherwise known as either a career map or a baseball card. And it basically, you juxtapose that career development, important promotion timelines, and other professional military education, and you basically mesh it all up, and then you tell your rater and the senior raters, your supervisors, during the initial meeting, and then you remind them along the way. That's how you navigate through. Don't ever expect anybody else to actually handhold you and then go through this whole process. Maybe in the very beginning, maybe during your time here at USU, yes, there's faculty advisors and a lot of good people who are actually trying to help you. But once you actually become independent, I would say internship and on. All right, so here are some of the take-home points, right? We talked about maintaining a good balance in endeavors in both profession of arms and profession of medicine. And it's an and, not an or, right? Some people think this is balance. Some people think this is balance. Some people think this is balance. It's totally up to you and your family and a lot of the other factors that are both within your sphere of control or outside of your sphere of control. But I would actually challenge you to get out there, get out of that comfort zone and explore both in military and civilian settings. Cultivate and cherish that mentor-mentee relationship and any human relationship. Military is small, and trust me, I didn't think that Lieutenant Kim's going to be sitting in my lecture here. Be a good leader and be a good team member. Was it Socrates or somebody who says, first be a good human, right? Whatever you try to do. Be the medical lens for non-medical leaders to see missions through. Very important, because if you don't, nobody else will, and the mission will fail, and you'll all suffer as a team. Plan out and deliberately manage clinical skills. Yes, it's fast advancing, and don't rely on anybody else but yourself to try to kind of maintain that as well. These are my references. Any questions? Comments? Some of the challenges, I mean, like, yeah, I mean, me as a Korean American, I was 17 when I came to the States, and I didn't speak a thing or whatever. So it's a little bit skewed. My experiences was a little bit skewed because I didn't need any interpreter or whatever, you know, and then I kind of maintained my relationship with my, you know, high school friends who all went to Korean compulsory military duties and stuff like that. So I kind of spoke both languages, not just the language itself, but the military terminology and all that stuff. Even with that, the biggest thing is, well, I think it became most obvious when I actually wrote the O plan, Operation, then with the Korean counterparts. It used to be that Koreans would write it and then we would actually translate that in English. Well, actually, it was the other way around, because the Combined Forces Command and all the agreements, the UN command, all that other stuff, they were mostly in English, translated in Korean, and then it was executed throughout the peninsula. A lot of issues, you know, lost in translation and stuff like that. So that was the first effort when the Koreans actually wrote the joint plan. And then we came up with an English translation of it. And because I actually spoke both languages and understood all that stuff, I wrote both of them and then signed it as a US representative to the soft Annex Q portion of O-Plan, blah, 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 at the time. Very, very, very difficult to communicate at that level of detail. Cultural, politics, you know, you say one thing and different people think about different things. So I'm not sure if I actually answered your question, but yes, there are, even with the advantages that I had, I still struggled with this. So just think about how much of issues on the interoperability just that any American Joe would actually experience, right? And that is a reason for me to emphasize the exchange programs rather than, oh, it's too hard, we shouldn't do it. Good question. Anything else? Yep.
Find that, like, so we have these summer opportunities, operational experiences. That be a helpful experience.
Absolutely.
And then, but even if you don't decide to do that, do you think that will to you know,
Yes, yes. I mean, there's this concept in economics called opportunity cost, right? You get to actually make a choice, and in choosing to do so, you're not being able to do something else. You have to weigh those things, and Airborne and all those schools, I highly recommend that whenever you can, you do, but carefully weigh those things with other opportunities that you'll be foregoing. But if you do have those badges, it's not just kind of showing off, and you understand those missions. That's what it means, not just to decorate your chest. Good question. Anything from our colleagues, mentors? No? All right. Thank you very much for having me again.
Sorry.
Thank you so much. I'm sorry I had to lead a meeting for the Surgeon General's office at noon. Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
Thank you, everyone, and thank you, everyone who joined virtually. Thank you, Dr. Kim.
Yeah, they may have actually asked some online questions.
I was looking, I haven't seen any questions in the chat.